Okay, Nicolas Sauret is a PhD candidate at the University of Montreal and the University Paris X. I'm very interested in what the X is about. That's editorial, sorry. That's not in his bio. His research at the Canadian Research Chair in Digital Textualities focuses on digital edition and publishing and its impact on the production and dissemination of knowledge. By combining theory, design, and making, his PhD research intersects with his previous work at the Institut de Recherche Anglo pronunciations, d'Innovation du Centre Pompidou, as a research engineer and project manager. Since 2011 at IRI and now at the Digital Textualities Lab, he co-organizes the international conference Série Écriture Numérique et Editorialisation. That was bad. We'll move on. In collaboration with the journal, this is not fair to put so much French in this. Sorry. In collaboration with the journal Sens Public and the Dyson IDF Lab. My apologies, Nicolas. It's your go now.
It's perfect. Thank you.
You're very kind.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt, and sorry, everybody, for not being here with you. I have about 10 kids at home right now, so if it gets noisy, just let me know. I'm starting with the presentation of the project. In 2016, the journal Sens Public launched a project to redesign its website. But the project quickly pushes the team to rethink the journal technically, editorially, and philosophically all at once. What appeared as a straightforward project eventually revealed itself as a complex one that opened multiple sub-projects nested in one another. One of which was experimenting a new editorial format for scholarly communication that would take place within the journal, and we name this format The Conversation. This sub-project is still in an early phase in terms of implementing, but it has been through quite a lot of thinking in the design of the format. So why a conversational editorial format? We built our experimentation on the assessment that the writing and reading practices of scholars in the humanities, which have largely moved on towards the digital environment, were not in tune anymore with the traditional forms of scholarly communication, such as the article, the monograph, or the conference. Indeed, the digital environment has disrupted the traditional relationships between institutions, apparatus, and medium, disrupting at the same time the traditional epistemological model, and particularly academic publishing. Sorry. So first, the traditional artifacts are out of tune because of an institutional delay. The research are evaluated mainly on the prestige of the journals rather than on the scientific quality of the research. This is a direct consequence of the Science Citation Index that was established in the 60s and which set the famous publish or perish as a leitmotif. In that evaluation paradigms, journals are seen as a mean for one's career and not as a mean for discussion and sharing. Moreover, the institutions are not able to fully take in consideration new forms of writing and publishing, natively digital, such as blogging, microblogging, mailing lists, multiple contribution platform, etc. Secondly, they are out of tune because of an editorial delay. In terms of publishing, we can observe a shift in the traditional modes of publishing, which remain largely based on the printing model, ignoring the very nature of the digital text and the potential of digital environments. Yes, some formats and platforms have enhanced standards and access, but the article, the monograph, or even the proceeding have not yet gone digital. These forms of scholarly communication deeply inherited from the pre-digital era, whether it be on the economic and legal aspects, such as certain understanding of copyright, or on the technical aspects, greatly depending on paper, book, and printing expertise. One could think that the great scientific conversation is going down, but on the contrary, it goes very well, but out of the radar of the institution. And in fact, the places and the forms of controversy and consensus slip from the institution and the grasp of the institution. From here, we decided to rethink the role and the mission of the journal in the humanities, and more precisely, to renew or revitalize its original mission, which is to create a public space for sharing and discussing hypotheses, ideas, experiences, aiming at one goal only, the progress of knowledge. Such ambition does not come out of the blue for Sens Public. It has a particular history that makes the journal a natural place for such an experimentation. From its origin on the web in 2003, the journal never stopped to address the issue of the production and the circulation of knowledge in the digital era. Therefore, experimenting a new form of scholarly communication aligns naturally with the journal's DNA. It aims at opening a new kind of public and publishing space in which the scientific community can develop into an intelligence network. A concept helped us to conceive what will be a conversation. The crystal of knowledge was introduced by Jean-Claude Guédon. For him, we need to question the article as an efficient form for knowledge circulation. He imagines shorter formats in order to make the scientific discourse more fluid. His metaphor of the crystal is useful to imagine those short forms aggregating into crystals in a process of crystallization similar to the settlement of the scientific discourse, but in a temporary and transitory way. Following this metaphor of the crystal, we imagined the conversation as a scientific issue raised to the community on which elements will aggregate and crystallize. Some people, whether they are readers, contributors, authors, or even cited authors, some contribution in the form of discussion threads, articles, annotation, text fragments, aggregating together to shape a temporary intelligence and knowledge network. Temporary, since the question shared by the community can be ephemeral or persistent. The principle is that the crystal can emerge, crystallize, and then dissolve according to the community, to what the community is willing to address. Therefore, the journal will have two spaces, like two access points, a documentary one based on articles and a conversational one based on social writing. But one should think of them as one information space, like the two sides of a coin. They will fill each other with information, since the articles become the medium and the pretext for discussion and conversation, whereas indeed the conversations can eventually give birth to more traditional publications, such as articles. But you can notice that the dynamic of the journal is changing. From the journal issues to the journal conversation, it is not anymore a handful of authors writing individually or on unilaterally proposed subject, but rather a community collectively raising and addressing an issue. So what are the objectives in designing the conversation? First of all, it is the creation of a common space for sharing ideas, discussing issues, and confronting theories. It should be a place to produce knowledge by mobilizing resources and people. But we know that the web can be a place of low thinking, or reflex acting, or even worse, of thought control. Nicolas considers that internet as a medium reduces our capacity of concentration and thinking. Dominique Cardon worries about the predominance of affinity in the content of recommendation, in the content recommendation. Antoinette Rouvroy, on the other hand, thinks that the algorithmic governmentality or algorithmic regime reduces the individual subjectivity and their future to predictive profiles. Indeed, many works on the shame of attention in the digital environment have analyzed how the web as a communication medium tends towards diminishing the common space of memory and knowledge. However, our hypothesis is that by bringing together the social regime and the documentary regime together in one format and one dispositif, we can recreate such common space and fostering a collective hermeneutic. In 2013, Louise Merzeau analyzed a dispositif that was designed to collaboratively document a 2-day conference. It appears that not only the participants had fully documented the presentation, but also that they had developed collectively a critical discourse around the conference that went beyond the idea expressed during the event. For Merzeau, the dispositif was successful in becoming a common space for knowledge through discussion thanks to 4 characteristics. reflexivity, appropriation, distance, and bienveillance. Reflexivity is the capacity to provide synthetic views of the conversation so that each contributor can position itself in the collective discourse and take action. It answers the question, where am I? More importantly, it allows the community to visualize a common purpose and therefore to collectively negotiate the purpose by acting on it. And this answers the question, where are we going in this conversation? In our conversation format and dispositif, we propose several visualization and overview. Cartography of the people, cartography of the resource involved, cartography of concepts semantically bound together, but also spatial distribution on the resource against the linear layout of the conversation. We also propose a structuring of the flow with chapters divisions, providing some kind of storytelling. And finally, by using personal collection, sort of Storyfy-like of conversation fragments in order to let the community make sense of the conversation. Appropriation consists at stimulating the circulation and the reuse of contents and resources, fostering new association of ideas. By constant pasting and rewriting, fragments are confronted with others. Contributors can select, organize, rewrite the resource, producing critical annotation and gloss. Appropriation must be seen as a new editorial function, just like selection, editing, and layout were the main duties of editors and in general of institutions. In the digital environment, it is not about making the resource accessible anymore. It is about making the resource accessible and appropriable, which is making its appropriation possible. Institutions must create the condition of possibility for the appropriation of knowledge resource. Distance, it's a tricky one. I'm talking about the distance between two fragments of meaning. Video editors know that very well. It's a principle of video editing. Bring together two shots and it creates a new meaning. In between two fragments of meaning, there is always an interstice, a small room where critical thinking can flourish. Those interstices are the very place of the interpretation. They play the role of circuit breaker, inhibiting our reflex behaviors. It has the power to restore our cognitive capacities that were short-circuited or bypassed by algorithm, affinity, and probability regime of the social networks. Fake news grows on reflex behaviors. Knowledge circulation system must then introduce distance in order to restore critical thinking. In that sense, I would say that Stack Overflow has a much better design in terms of critical thinking than Facebook. In Wismer's theory, the system's bienveillance, or we can say tolerance, is its property to include individuals and also to be adopted by the individuals, very much like a prothesis. There is a special metaphor again in the bienveillance. She used the terms bienveillance dispositive for a dispositif or a system that can be inhabited and occupied by their contributors. There is a sense of appropriation again, but not the appropriation of resource, the appropriation of the dispositif itself. By using it, contributors are indeed contributing to the dispositif. Their writing and rewriting of resource are indeed the writing of the dispositif itself. We can talk of medium writing, or in French, écriture milieu, where writing acts both within the milieu and on the milieu. In concrete terms, the first action of bienveillance that can be taken is to co-design the dispositif with the communities that will use it. It's also to allow the evolution of the dispositif following its usage and its écriture, writing, by the community. Finally, a common space for knowledge must start with an open governance of the space itself. The conversation has a strong time dimension, but to become a format and a document, we must articulate the temporal dimension with the spatial dimension of the document. There is a tension here between flow and synthesis, tension to be maintained so that the dynamic of the conversation can perpetuate. There is a sense of instability or metastability that reminds the metaphor of the crystal. Short form and fragment can crystallize, dissolve according to a temporality is more fluid than the article temporality. Our hypothesis here is that our hybrid reading and writing practices should inspire us a new form of scholarly communication. And there is a precedent in history, a precedent that truly legitimizes this hypothesis. Back in the 16th and the 17th century, the Republic of Letters is known for the intense exchange of letters between scholars. And in 1665 was born the first scholarly journal, the Journal des Savants. It was rapidly followed by other titles. And what the journals were doing at that time was first to edit and print the one-to-one letters so that more readers could benefit from them. And from then started a process of formalization of the epistolary genre and format towards what became in about 2 decades the scientific articles as we know it today. So journal in the 17th century simply invented a new communication format to enhance the great scientific conversation. The article was a perfect artifact for sharing knowledge in the printing environment. According to nowadays writing and social practices, we can legitimately foresee a new kind of scholarly communication that fully embrace the digital environment. It's only a question of formalization. However, there are 2 pitfalls to avoid when modelizing and formalizing practices. First is the draining of its dynamic, and second, the enclosure of meaning. But we believe that the principles of the commons should help us avoid these obstacles by opening the governance of our systems and dispositive to the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolas. That was great. I'm going to invite Luis up. I'm just going to table you for a minute, Nicolas, and bring you back at the end.